If you've been browsing the gaming side of the internet, you may have come across the argument that graphics don't matter. Now, I understand that whoever was the first to use that line probably meant to say that the never-ending pursuit of graphical fidelity is negatively affecting the games industry, and not that Bubsy 3D is a masterpiece so long as you ignore the blood dripping from your eyes. What are we actually talking about when we say graphics? And how do graphics intersect with art direction? Are graphics just one of the many components in the art direction toolbox? Or do they play a larger role in how we experience games? When looking at it from a technical standpoint, what even are graphics if not applied art direction? By this point you may have noticed I've been playing Oblivion Remastered. And in short, I like it. The game looks amazing, and while in theory it does lose some of the original art direction the 2006 version had, I think the trade-off is worth it. That brings us to Morrowind and Skyrim, two games in the same series that serve as a great example for discussing the role of graphics in video games. Personally, I've played Morrowind on and off for years now, but it never really clicked with me. Part of that is down to the outdated mechanics. The game isn't exactly friendly to anyone who doesn't want to spec into athletics early game, and it's the only one in the series without a mount. Skyrim would later remove these movement-based systems to streamline the experience, and after Morrowind, fast travel would be simplified. In Skyrim and Oblivion, you can just click on the map. In Morrowind, you're stuck with the Silt Striders. Or you can drink your favorite canned F1 driver and full throttle through the sky. But here's the thing. The real reason the Morrowind-Skyrim comparison matters aren't about the mechanics. That's usually where you'd hear the argument that Morrowind is more immersive. But is it? Is Morrowind more immersive despite the graphical gap? But let's back up for a second. What do people mean when they say a game is immersive? Immersion can be tricky to define, but I'd say it's the ability to completely lose yourself in the world of the media you're consuming. You dive in, and as long as you're doing your part to suspend disbelief, you're locked into the world of the book, movie, game, hentai, whatever. Immersion is when your brain forgets that you're sitting at a desk with bad posture and instead you buy into the fantasy. And immersion isn't just fantasy roleplay for its own sake. If the game feels real, then so do your accomplishments. The characters feel authentic, and by extension, your relationships with them. Take Mass Effect. In that game, my bond with the characters ended up feeling more real than the characters themselves. Finishing missions in Mass Effect isn't just about getting a dopamine hit. It's the immersion that elevates those objectives. It matters whether I bring Garrus or Thane on a mission, not because of the combat stats, but because it doesn't feel right without them whispering sweet nothings into my ears while I commit interstellar war crimes against the Batarians. When a game nails immersion, it taps into a feeling that you probably haven't had in years. That true sense of wonder and excitement just to keep going, which for me was probably around the time that Hunipop released. Immersion makes the gameplay loop hit better. Without it, even the best designed mechanics can feel flat. You might as well be playing Solitaire on Windows XP while waiting for your dad to come back with the milk. And hey, Solitaire slaps. I'm not above it. But let's be real. You'll never forget that you're a person hunched over a screen watching pixels wiggle around. That's what zero immersion truly feels like. If immersion is the goal, what role do visuals play in achieving it? Games, at least in part, are a visual medium. And in that sense, they share some DNA with film. You can absolutely tell a compelling story without beautiful cinematography or all the high-end gear that is required to create a certain look, just like how plenty of games thrive despite dated visuals. But great cinematography doesn't just decorate a film, it elevates it. I've made this point before, but the reason I think Matt Reeves' The Batman resonated with audiences so much was at least partially due to its often praised visuals. Now here's the key difference. Games don't just show you a world, they put you in it. But you know what does have great cinematography? Oh my god, look at it, it's right there, and it's called Midlands Mayhem. You can watch the trailer right now, the link is in the description. Watch it, watch it, watch it! This brings us back to graphics. Graphics have progressed at an astounding rate, considering there was only 2 games released between 1972 and 2013. Over the decades, graphics have served 2 main purposes, showing off the power of the new hardware and making games feel more real. For a long time, more realistic equaled better, and that mindset can still be seen today. That's where the disconnect occurred. In an effort to make games more immersive, and by extension more real, photorealistic graphics have shown that they're hit or miss. Look at Unreal 5 and Oblivion Remastered. The game looks great, but the danger of using photorealistic graphics is that they can highlight how out of place the more magical or surreal elements of a game might feel. Take Obsidian's supposed rival to the Elder Scrolls, Avowed. It also uses Unreal 5, and sure, the lighting does look great, But that doesn't do the heavy lifting when the world building is missing the mark and the character design feels uninspired. No amount of ray tracing is going to save a world that looks and feels generic. And that's the heart of it. Photorealistic graphics aren't the carry, world building is. Oblivion Remastered works because it's building on a foundation of a world people already care about. The Elder Scrolls series has that advantage. But here's the thing, it's the graphics that make that world easier to believe. It's not just the lighting engine or the high-res textures pulling you in, it's how those visuals enhance the sense that the world is lived in, coherent, and real. The graphics aren't there just to look pretty, they're there to sell the fantasy. There are few franchises that can compete with the Elder Scrolls in terms of world building, but it's the graphics that help make the world stick. Today, Morrowind is what you get when someone realizes that photorealism isn't the be-all and end-all of immersion. This game takes what little it was given as Bethesda's last-ditch effort to avoid bankruptcy, and somehow, it worked. There is an undeniable quality in trying to make the game satisfying, even just from the quest descriptions. Reading those descriptions, asking NPCs for directions, and finding quest objectives gives you a sense of accomplishment and ties you to the world, rather than just turning your brain off and following the glowing arrow. Skyrim does give you the option to turn off quest markers, but without any of the systems I just mentioned, it really is just a gimmick. There's a greater sense of weight and consequence within Morrowind, like with the guilds. You have to put in the effort, train, and level up your skills to move up the ranks. Joining one guild can wall off content from another guild entirely. Now, do I understand Bethesda's philosophy of not necessarily forcing the player to re-roll characters just to experience all the game's content? Yeah. Do I also understand that in Skyrim, if you become the CEO of 7 completely different organizations in the space of 20 minutes each, it kind of breaks the world building a bit? I do. But Morrowind's mechanics are designed around maximizing immersion. Even with how the athletics and stamina systems work, if you run out of stamina and you get ambushed, you're screwed. You lose most of your combat effectiveness, and that is realistic. There is a reason the industry has been hell-bent on chasing realism. It's long been seen as the shortcut to immersion. That mindset comes from the late 90s to early 2010s, an era when everyone lost their mind over shinier and more realistic graphics. I don't even blame them. With the rapid pace of technological advancement, it was exciting to see the next big upgrade. But as a consequence, any game that wasn't chasing the cutting edge was dismissed. Just look at The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. People trashed it at launch, solely because it didn't look realistic. It was bright, it was stylized, and to some people that meant it wasn't serious. And now 20 years later, the game still looks great. When the tech curve started to flatten out, the industry clung to the idea that striving towards photorealism meant better games. This is where the AAA games industry and blockbuster films run into the same wall. They're both over-indexing on spectacle like it's a substitute for soul. This includes Morrowind as well. It was the Elder Scrolls' big jump into 3D, and no, I'm not mentioning Redguard, put your hand down. It carried the same assumption baked into the rest of the industry. Realism equals progress. One of the problems with modern video games isn't just their obsession with photorealism, it's their blind faith in it. It's expecting visuals to carry your game while ignoring fundamentals like player freedom, mechanical depth, and actual storytelling. The stuff that people remember once the shine wears off. Now that graphics have advanced so much, playing Morrowind in 2025, by comparison, requires blind faith in the opposite idea. That graphics don't matter. I get it. If graphics aren't a big deal to you, Morrowind has plenty of systems to get immersed in. But for me, its visual fidelity is one of the reasons that it falls flat. It comes from an era of gaming where the character models look like I'm at a wax museum without my glasses. Oh jinkies. You could say that if visuals matter to you so much, why don't you just install graphical mods? No thanks, honey. I'll spend my time making thinly veiled excuses to talk about my micropenis on the internet instead of figuring out how modding works. Even with mods, you couldn't escape the fact that Morrowind's graphics are incredibly dated. You remember how I said that if you don't feel immersed in a game, you may as well feel like you're playing solitaire and that I don't have a dad? Well, that's about the feeling I get when I try to play Morrowind. The blocky visuals, the unintuitive gameplay, the lack of milk, they're just barriers too big for me to cross. Now, I know the straw man I've been arguing with this entire time might say that Morrowind's graphics were great when they dropped. Let me give you a reminder. This game came out when my penis size was still considered average. Calling back to my point that graphics are just applied art direction, for a lot of fans, Morrowind's biggest selling point is its deliberately weird and alien aesthetic, but I'd argue the graphics hold the art direction back. With the dated visuals, the weirdness and the foreign ambience of the game is lost when what I'm looking at could be a croissant. The design is aiming for mystery, that sense of wonder and disorientation, and when it lands, it's powerful. But the visuals often undercut that goal, dulling the atmosphere instead of deepening it. But I'd argue more than any other game, Morrowind is the one that would benefit the most from an Unreal 5 remaster. It's my least favorite of the 3 main Elder Scrolls games. Put your hand down, I'm not mentioning Elder Scrolls Online. But even without touching a single gameplay system, I'd be more excited to play Morrowind in Unreal 5 than Oblivion. The mechanics are janky, outdated, and often frustrating, but if the visuals were strong enough to draw players in, those flaws might be easier to forgive. The right aesthetic could sell the mystery, the mood, and the atmosphere that the systems can't quite carry on their own. But with Skyrim on the horizon, we may end up getting the best of both. Just look at the Soulsborne series. Their worlds are weird, alien, and unsettling. But they are gorgeous, and that beauty matters. Those games rely on a strong visual design to sell the atmosphere, the mystery, and the dread. They weren't stuck in the early 3D era, and it shows. And for all the complaints people have about Skyrim, there's a reason it became the go-to wallpaper simulator of the Elder Scrolls trilogy. Whether you're a micropenis having alcoholic like me, or just a meth-addicted free spirit with a heart of gold, Skyrim is the game that you keep coming back to. You boot it up, you wander the countryside, take a screenshot of the sunset, and pretend it's 2011 again. Graphics give a flair to a game that it needs in order to truly stand out, and they can even serve to mitigate some of the game's shortcomings. Most games I've heard of require you to actively look at your screen for extended periods of time. If a game is pretty, it does make the game better. This doesn't mean that games emulating older art styles can't still look good. A game like Shovel Knight, for example, mimics the look of the NES, but it doesn't have to stick to that console's limited color palette. It can stay true to the style without being chained to the hardware. There's definitely a layer of nostalgia at play in retro-inspired visuals. Hell, I love the Thief games, and those character models are absolute trash. But choosing to emulate an older art style can still work beautifully when it's in sync with strong art direction. One of the issues with a lot of modern games is the visual clutter. Environments so overloaded with detail that it's hard to tell what you can actually interact with. That's where a simplified art style can shine. By stripping things back, these games can create clearer visual language and stronger level design. Simpler graphics, when done right, don't limit a game. They elevate it. They help a game's atmosphere breathe. Individual elements can stand out instead of getting buried in a mess of indistinguishable low-poly shrubbery. Blasphemous is another great example. It uses a retro-inspired look that's both stylized and striking, full of character while still looking fantastic. But there's one game that, for me, takes this whole mantra way too far. Faith, the unholy trinity. I get that a retro aesthetic can create a sense of creepiness and uncanny valley horror, and Faith definitely leans into that. It's the same principle that makes found footage horror so effective. The graininess and rough edges make it feel more real and therefore more unsettling. But at a certain point, it just feels like I fell out of a wormhole into a timeline where Pong was the peak of graphical innovation. Yes, I understand that it's deliberately evoking an 80s vibe, complete with crunchy synth and lo-fi sound design. And in theory, that all works together to create a distinct mood. But in practice, it just feels like you need to have total disregard for the visuals to really enjoy it. Faith is a clear example of a game that's hyper niche, purely because of its graphics and art direction. It has to hook you with something other than its visuals, because for most people, those visuals are a deal breaker. Or maybe you've just left from your seat and declared, "Oh my god, a horror game that looks like Pong?" Look, you do you. I'm not one to judge, unless you play Sonic. So to answer the question, do graphics matter? Graphics are one element in the broader ecosystem of game design. They support atmosphere, reinforce tone, and in some cases, like with Borderlands, help a game age gracefully. I think a lot of people dismiss graphics because they've been reacting to the industry's obsession with photorealism. But that doesn't mean visuals don't play a meaningful role. They bring art direction to life, enhance emotional tone, and for older titles especially, can help bridge the gap between original intent and modern expectations. Games like Mass Effect, Cyberpunk 2077, or even Skyrim stand out because they feel like real places. Not just because of the mechanics, but because they're beautiful enough to make you want to exist in them. Art direction matters. Graphics matter. Graphics aren't immersion, they're the invitation. They're not the whole picture. But saying they don't matter at all? That's just wrong. Let's stop pretending that selecting a game because of its graphics makes you shallow. If you love Morrowind, good. But maybe let people enjoy Skyrim without having to pass a loyalty test first. But what do you think? Am I just a Skyrim baby who needs to be wheeled back to his pram and handed a sweet roll? Or has the idea that graphics don't matter gone unchallenged for too long? Either way, the choice is yours.